Morning from Hafiz, which many of you are probably familiar with Hafiz, who's a Sufi poet from the 14th century. Poetry is pretty well known. And here's sort of, maybe not as confused as our psalm, but it does point towards something. Forget every idea of right and wrong. Any classroom ever taught you. Because an empty heart, a tormented mind, unkindness, jealousy, and fear are always the testimony you have been completely fooled. Turn your back on those who would imprison your wondrous spirit with deceit and lies. Come, join the honest company of the king's beggars, those gamblers, scoundrels, and divine clowns, and those astonishing fair courtesans who need divine love every night. Come, join the courageous who have no choice but to bet their entire world that indeed, God is real. I will lead you into the circle of the beloved's cunning thieves, those playful royal rogues, the ones you can trust for true guidance. Who can aid you in this blessed calamity of life? Hafiz, look at the perfect one at the circle's center. He spins and whirls like a golden compass beyond all that is rational to show this dear world that everything in existence does point to God. Good poem. And you can see his little connection there to the whirling dervishes of the Sufis, right? This is part of the sect to which he belonged and celebrated. So in the next 2 weeks and 6 Psalms, we're going to examine the Psalms of despair or disorientation. Psalms perhaps as a more accurate reflection of life lived. All right, chapter 7, Psalm 27. I'm wondering if someone on the screen will read it from the book on page 75.
I'll be happy to.
That's good, because I think it'll be easier for y'all to hear if it's someone on the screen.
Psalm 27, a Davidic psalm. Adonai is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Adonai is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I dread? When evil people assail me to devour my flesh, it is they, my besiegers and enemies, who stumble and fall. If an army mount against me, my heart would not fear. Should war beset me, in this I would have confidence. A single request would I make of Adonai, that would I seek, that I might live in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, to calmly gaze upon Adonai, to visit his great hall. For were he to conceal me in his hut on an evil day, hide me in the enclosure of his tent, I would be raised as on the high fortress. Now, should he raise my head above my enemies round about, I would sacrifice in his tent to trumpet blasts, singing and chanting a hymn to Adonai. Hear my voice as I cry out, Adonai. Favor me, answer me. Of you, my heart says, seek my face. Adonai, seek your face. Do not hide your face from me. Do not push aside your servant in anger. You have been my help. Do not forsake me. Do not abandon me, God of my salvation. Though my father and my mother abandoned me, Adonai would gather me in. Show me your way, Adonai, and lead me on a straight path, despite those ranged against me. Do not subject me to the people who besiege me, for false witnesses and victims and vicious accusers have appeared against me. Had I not trusted that I might see the goodness of Adonai in the land of living, hope in Adonai. Strengthen yourself, be of courageous heart, hope in Adonai. Okay, now that I'm finished, was I pronouncing Adonai correctly, or is there another pronunciation?
That's it. Mhm.
That's fine.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Adonai.
That's right.
It can be Lord.
Go ahead, Kate.
I just said it could be Lord, could be, that's the Hebrew. Adonai,
Yeah.
but you could put Lord in there if you wanted to.
Okay, what is it that strikes you about the psalm or the chapter itself or anything that you guys?
Well, the psalm itself, I always liked the first line of Psalm 27. God is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? God is my stronghold of my life, whom shall I dread? I took that as very supportive, comforting. Then I go down some more and I think, this is a rough psalm.
Yes, at least it begins in faithfulness.
Yes.
It does begin in an expectation of faithfulness, which, is there. I think Rabbi Feld talks about a crisis of faith. Have any of you experienced a crisis of faith?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we all have. Absolutely.
Right.
Where we're not sure where we put our trust is actually where we should have, or that somehow we have missed the boat, or taken the wrong turn, or not heard God speaking, or, there's 1,000 things about that. On page 73, he talks about it as being kind of in three movements, this crisis of faith. And I wonder how you all reacted to that. The sense that the world does not reflect its creator. Well, that is every time we open the newspaper.
Yeah.
Because right now, yeah,
Right?
especially right now.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I think it's probably always been that way. If we read our Old Testament carefully, certainly there was plenty of reason to doubt God's, what was happening, what was the plan. That it doesn't reflect, certainly it doesn't reflect what we had experienced in those first Psalms. It doesn't reflect Psalm 8. It doesn't reflect Psalm 1. It doesn't, right? The world? Okay. So, and it's easy for us in the midst of that to have that feeling, real or imagined, of separation. We get that sense of separation.
Yeah, at the bottom, my life feels meaningless because I have no sense that God has touched it.
Yes,
That's tough.
that is tough. That is tough. And we've all, if
But
we
I think
haven't,
God has touched our life.
yeah, if we haven't experienced that, we do know someone for whom that is true, right? Even if the
Yes.
depth of it has not been our experience, we do know people for whom this is. When we talk to them about God and God's goodness, there's the sense that they have being separated and life feeling meaningless. He says the second motif then will result in this loss of faith. Which makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you think about it in terms of a brand of ice cream, if I get the ice cream one time and it's delicious, but then the next 8 times I eat it, it's terrible. I now have a loss of faith in the ability of the ice cream company to manufacture an ice cream that makes sense. We wouldn't keep buying that ice cream if it wasn't giving us that satisfaction, right? Even though at one point we thought, maybe we thought that ice cream was good, but maybe there was something wrong with us, right? Okay. That was a very silly example, but it's all I could think of.
I was trying to put it all together. I got
Maybe you all have better examples of that, but,
Well, maybe we're all craving ice cream right now.
that's it.
no, I mean,
But, now you might see this progression that some have called in the Christian tradition, you know, like the dark night of the soul, the dark night of the spirit, the loss of union. These are all very familiar terms, with those who understand the religious life, and sometimes they're connected to actual depression coming from chemical things or life things. That's a real thing. Not all depression could be seen as a dark night of the soul, but oftentimes it has the same manifestation. Parker Palmer, you know who Parker Palmer is, the Quaker author, really distinguished educator, talks about his own experience with depression and the dark night of the soul. And he does a really good job of looking for and talking about his own experiences of recovering God in his life. All right, there's a third motif. He says, less explicitly personal, intertwined with these complaints. And this is where we get to that larger systemic understanding of things like God's justice, right? Things in the world with things that trouble us. The promise of a moral order, he writes, that is seen either implicitly or explicitly in a biblical faith. And it's not really visible in the world. Who else is operating by these principles? We might say it like that, right? We've had that experience.
well, I have it a lot.
Yes, you
I mean,
do.
Yes, I
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
I mean, that is probably, when I read that, I thought, well, at least somebody else put it into words, so I must not be the only one. But that is my biggest
Yeah.
problem.
Absolutely.
Not my biggest problem, but I mean, it's a biblically, that's what sort of,
And I hope that provides some sort of undergirding for you, like that you're not, or any of us is not just sort of, oh, I'm just a half empty glass person, right? Or I just can't get out of my own head, or I can't, whatever it is, that this is it's an accurate reflection, right, of our experience. And I'm trying to remember the name of the book. Well, you guys know that expression about emotional IQ, right? The EQ, and there are just people who more definitely feel things in the world. They are there. They don't normally get, they're not in school and so forth, and in a lot of time in families, we try to redirect their feeling and their emotional response to things as being not appropriate. When in fact, they are the feelers of the world, right? They are the empaths. They are right? And that's just, it's not widely recognized or honored, or at least it hasn't been. I can't remember the title of the darn book. Lawson, you might remember it.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
it's lost.
Yeah, but it's it's just a good touchstone to sort of say, oh, other people feel this way. This is a way to see the world that has validity, and it doesn't all look like this. So, but again, less understood, less valued in many of our institutions, and even in families. So, but I think that's kind of a social expression of this. I mean, and what we're seeing and reading about is a biblical expression of it as well. So I think so what I think is that biblically, it gets good support for that being true.
What page are you on this book?
74.
74.
She hadn't been talking, you know,
I haven't been talking about the book.
yeah, she's been talking.
I've just been talking, so.
That's okay.
What about what the page is about?
Right. So he uses this idea that this is that this has a war theme, an army theme, I'm in a foxhole kind of theme, a battle, right? Did any of you get that sense as you read it or not?
I try not to think about words.
Okay.
I mean,
He said, he's calling it a battle, and like, he says this in the middle of 76, the battle between hope and faith. If that's
Yeah.
easy for us, to think about as opposed to, war in the kind of modern day interpretation. So it's the battle between faith and hope and the condition of the poet, on the other hand. And he uses the feminine, I mean, for us today as all women in this room, he chose to use the feminine pronoun throughout this chapter, which I hope made it easier to connect to in some way.
Well, I found it amazing
Yeah. It
that in
doesn't
the
have,
middle of old, Hebrew scripture or whatever, that it would be in the feminine. And I couldn't decide whether it was only, they thought that only a woman would have these doubts. I don't, somewhere in my head I'm going, I really had never seen a woman done in the female version of it. And that kind of, but maybe we are.
I did not make that connection, Kate, but an interesting observation. So we've all experienced this, I'm guessing. You might want to speak to this internal war. This is what he's talking about.
Mhm.
At the top of page 77. There is a hint of the eternal war that we are soon to witness in the choice of he says this is done through the literary, using a rhetorical questioning, that's how that gets expressed. Because it says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. And if that's true, then whom shall I fear? The Lord is my stronghold, but whom shall I dread? Right? Now, it could be, as Ginger said, a reinforcement of the first half of each sentence. But as Rabbi Feld says, it introduces this idea that I have fear and I am dreading something. It introduces it. It doesn't just stop. It doesn't just say, Adonai is my light and salvation. Different than adding the question at the end, right? Adonai is the stronghold of my life. No, that's not where it stops. Whom shall I fear? So there's already introducing this idea of the back and forth. That's his point in the psalm anyway. Because he goes on, and I have circled this, the absolute and naive faith, the opening lines begins to undercut as it introduces a wish, a hint at the lack found in the poet's life. And he goes on to say he sees this as an innocent appeal, right? Like, so very sort of childlike.
Like a child wanting to be with their parent.
Right, I want to see you.
Yeah.
And how often does that come up in the text, in the scripture, to see God, right? In our hymnody and in the Psalms. That's just a very familiar refrain. And I would dare say, in my own prayer life, that's a phrase that I use pretty regularly. And I mean it like, how can I see God in a situation sometimes, right? Show me where you are in this mess. right? Or even in my own head about the mess.
I've asked that.
Yes.
A lot of us are asking that right now, again, with the world situation. Where is God? No, I had there in the middle of odds. I mean, I've been diagnosed with breast cancer. And 18 months later, I fell and broke my leg in 3 different places. 6 months after that, I ruptured a disc in my neck. And at that point, I'm screaming, what have I done? Where is God? I mean, I was angry.
Yeah,
I was really lost. I came through it all.
I kind of think God would expect that out of us.
Well, I wanted to know, what have I done that was so bad that I was being punished? I honestly felt that way, that I was
Yeah.
being punished. I didn't think I was a bad person.
How did you resolve that? Or can you talk about it? I mean, that's a very personal thing, and I just wonder.
Well, my prayer life was strong, and I just had to continue to pray, and, you know, I did get better. The breast cancer, thankfully, was not malignant. It was caught early. I had a lumpectomy and radiation, and I was fine. I had an excellent surgeon who operated on my leg, and my leg has given me problems. Again, I
God took
had
care of you
a
there.
different surgeon who operated on the neck, and after 10 days of excruciating pain, I woke up completely free of pain. So I think God was with me. It was just the timing. Everything was so close, but I came through it. But no, it didn't take a lot of prayer, even though I was so angry. I think I was ready to see God a lot.
Yeah, would you have called that a crisis of faith?
Yeah, in that moment when
Yeah.
yeah.
And he goes on to say, in those lines, let's go to the top of 80. God is not a felt presence, but a perceived absence.
Oh, yes, I have that as a line.
Yeah, this is what Lynn was talking about. Reality contradicts the inner life of the faithful. The religious life is conducted in light of paradox. This is that word again that we've been struggling with a little bit. Inner wish, faithfulness, and outer reality are not congruent. And we know enough about psychology to know that our brains love to line stuff up. They like it, they're seeking that. And when things are not lined up, it troubles our spirit as we seek to make sense of things. Now, religious mystics, scholars have said for years that when that incongruence occurs, we can find those times to be, yes, they can push us away from God, but they can also be a time for us to examine our lives in a different way, right? Because if everything's going swimmingly, do you take the time to sort of sit down and say, that things are, because things are fine. But when things are incongruent, that's when that troubling is what Ignatius called, what did he call it? Like disconsolation is what Ignatius called it. Disconsolation, which is what these Psalms are about.
Yes.
Right? So Ignatius knew that these Psalms, that these moments of disconsolation in our life are God speaking to us in a different way and asking us to examine ourselves in a different way. So again, not what the rabbi was writing about, but I'm thinking in my own life, my own experience, since I have valued Ignatius in so many ways, and the Ignatian practices, that makes sense to me. And that this is a psalm that I have often prayed without knowing that. Like I liked the flow of this psalm. I liked like Ginger, like it starts off saying, God is my light and my salvation, my stronghold, right? And then
It's good.
it descends. I don't know that I've ever paid attention to the rest of it, truthfully.
I know you read the beginning and okay, that's the message,
Yeah,
and then you.
go to the end. Yeah. Okay, what else, would you say about this psalm? We got a few more pages in the chapter.
Well, you skipped over this whole thing when he started talking about the hut and the
The
tent
tent?
and all that. I'm sitting there going, that was just an interesting perspective that I had never, I haven't heard anything referenced before like that.
Okay.
And,
Where are you?
Well,
that's
he's,
from 78 and 79.
yes, and it comes from verse 6, right? When verse 6 where it says, I would sacrifice in his tent to trumpet blasts. I would offer something in the midst of music, singing and chanting a hymn to Adonai. And the author goes into great detail about tents and huts and God's presence in them and the permanence or the not permanence of a tent, the more permanence of a hut, how God has moved from, if you recall your Israel history, right? The Ark of the Covenant carrying the commandments around where God was residing. And then David's desire to build a temple where God would be forever. Solomon's completion of that. Anyway, just the understanding of where God is and where God resides, how that developed in Israel's history. So he does spend a fair amount of time in that, but he relates it to the fragility of those constructions. That's what he talks about.
But it says, in the tent had the same sturdiness as the stone temple, and how he referred to him in first order. Because in 4, he says his great hall, and in 5, he has his hut, and 5, he has his tent, and then he repeats his tent in 6.
Yeah, right.
Like, so he is, no matter how sturdy our house is, if God's in you, he's there. It's got the same sturdiness as the temple.
Yeah.
So I like it when it says strength depends on our mind, our soul, our spiritual heart.
Where are you doing?
That's in the 79 when
Yes,
that middle of
the
that
middle part.
in the middle of that paragraph when he started describing and just talking about all these tents, huts,
And compares the human structure to God's structure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There was one thing I absolutely loved about his explanation on page 83. At the very bottom,
Yeah.
the poet of Psalm 27 has moved from pride to humility. Faith has been replaced by hope. Faith believes absolutely in its rightness. Hope understands that though the evidence is to the contrary, though there is much room for doubt, nevertheless, the faithful manage to live with expectation. Faith is brazen. Hope is humble. I just thought that was something very important to ponder for those of us who are involved in the healing ministry, because faith is such a critical part of that. But I just thought this was something really to think about. Sometimes it's easy to get tripped up on having faith in your faith rather than faith in the mercy of the Lord. So that just really spoke loudly to me that we need to be gentle when we are investigating healings and why they happen and why they don't.
Thank you. I think it's interesting because how anything can become for us something for which we are proud, like anything, even something that we would think, well, that's a good thing to have faith, of course. But misplaced faith or faith used as a weapon, or, I mean, think of or to manipulate, right? Like, these are the things I think about often. And, yes, and how hope, what we are always talking about in hope is, and I've never thought of it as hope as humble,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful paragraph.
I just want to put more, I put stars all around it in my book because so I could go back and read it often. It makes me feel
Yeah.
good that she's, well, that she found it too. But it's troublesome that people that show, I don't know how to say this, and people that show a lot of, when they want to talk about faith and it sounds more arrogant and push offy. I mean, you want to say, okay, that's your idea. People that are so over the top
Mhm,
all the time.
mhm.
And it kind of brings you up short. And then I start thinking about the times when you don't, I don't know how to say this. Obviously, I don't know how to say it. That I have to just hope that all the things that are being done, or hope that the things that everybody is praying for will happen, and not buy into this will happen because we're praying for it. Does that make any sense?
Yes. And I think that this paragraph gives us some words to something that we may have felt, but not known how to articulate. I think your inability to articulate is not unusual, because this is a nuance that would be hard to say. I don't know why I don't like that, or I don't know why that makes me uncomfortable, or I don't know why, I don't understand. It doesn't seem like it should be a bad thing. Faith, how is that a bad thing? That's what how many sermons have I preached about faith? I mean, hundreds. So I think that sometimes maybe the psalm, or at least the author's interpretation of the psalm, has given some of us some language, Kate, to sort of wrap around a thought that is very complex. I think that's a very deep level of theological thinking. I do. And what we do with that and how we hold on to that and, where that goes, I don't know. But I think it has opened, has cracked a door for me about talking about it. And I'm not sure that I would do as well as he did if I was there. I'm thinking about it because our Lenten program is on the petitions from the Ash Wednesday Litany, right? And we take different petitions every week, and forgive me for my sins of pride. And I'm thinking about that petition and using this psalm and that explanation to talk about, how because sometimes our sins are as fine as a human hair, right? We don't recognize them. They don't stand out. Like, if I go and stab my neighbor, I think you all, it's a sin, right? But our sins are not like that. You all are not going and stabbing anyone. Our sins are like that, are like the way that that's described. And then how do we recognize that? And what do we do? And how does God help us in that? And that movement from pride to humility. And how do we walk that walk? So I just, of course, we're proud of many things. Our children, our stuff, our knowledge, our ability to read this book and have maybe a conversation about it. I'm proud of that. I know that. And I know that the reason that God calls it a sin maybe is because it will eventually trip us up. But luckily, that's why we have each other and God and Jesus Christ to, intercede for us. So that light bulb in your disconsolation about why is it when someone says that, or why is it when I'm participating in that? Why does that feel not quite right? See, there's that incongruence making itself known. And however long it takes for us to sort of walk our way through it or ask God to help us. Because I think that's an aha God moment, Lawson, to see that, hear that, be able to receive that in that way. Like, we've read stuff all of our lives, and sometimes you can just read it a different way. I mean, I'm rereading the Chronicles of Narnia, right? I've read it a million times. I'm reading it now, I'm like, oh, whatever. So, so we're always, hopefully, that's how God's working in us, in the Psalm and in other ways as well. Is there anything else anyone wants to say about that or Psalm 27? Because we can go to the next chapter, which he is titled The Torn Soul.
Now, this was a downer.
Yeah, and it starts out so beautifully, right? And this, we all know it, and, it sounds like, yes, this is my soul searching. I didn't know I was supposed to be torn, but I'm learning. So nothing else on Psalm 27. Laura Flaherty, can I get you to read Psalm 42?
Come off mute.
You're on mute, hon. It's okay.
Of the Haskell to the Korahites. As the stag yearns for a stream suddenly bursting forth, so my soul yearns for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, the living God. When will I come and appear before God? Night and day, my bread was my tears. For each day people said to me, where is your God? This I recall as I pour out my soul. I would travel by pavilion, wending my way to God's house, joining with celebrating crowds, singing joyously and thankfully. Why are you bent over, O my soul? Why are you moaning within me? Wait upon God, for I still acknowledge him. Victories precede him. My God, my soul is bent over as I think of you, in the land of Jordan and Hermon, on Mount Mizar, where deep calls to deep, amidst the sound of your cataracts, and all your waves and breakers pour over me. By day, may Adonai command his love for me, and in the evening, may he sing lullabies to me. That is my prayer to the God of my being. Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
That I would say to my God, my rock. Why have you forgotten me? Why must I walk in darkness, oppressed by my enemies, slaughtering me to the bone? My besiegers ridicule me. As each day they ask, where is your God? Why are you bent over, O my soul? Why are you moaning within me? Await God, for I still acknowledge him. Victory will go before me and my God.
So much like a 4-year-old, can you see the why questions? Why? And then that phrase that gets repeated. Why are you bent over, O my soul? So he says right there at the end, at the top of page 87, that this is an image of intense but unmet desire. So almost like one of those terrible poems that we write in the 8th grade about our unrequited love. You all wrote them. They were all awful, and but it's intense. It's desire. It's that feeling of something that's not met. I think if you have to go back to that understanding of desiring something that's not gonna, or isn't gonna happen, or hasn't happened yet. And that feeling that you can only have as a eighth grader, I think, when your hormones are functioning like they function, right? That you feel everything so intensely because you've never felt it before, because you desire it so much, because life seems to hang in the balance of that.
And so my soul has been over and just moaning inside of
That's right.
myself.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause I love verse 9. Verse 9 is just taken out by itself. Was my favorite part. I mean, that is a phrase that I've heard, read before, and is one of my favorites.
Oh, the idea of God singing a lullaby?
Mhm.
Really,
Yeah.
and that is, by day, may Adonai command his love for me. And in the evening, may he sing lullabies to me. That in my prayer of God, of my being.
And remember, he goes into great detail then about where this psalm began, where this poem began. It begins with this urge to drink, right? This thirst. Again, it's a very kind of primal feeling. Yep. It's not like, oh, I could use a drink of water. No, there's longing, there's desire, there's something, well, we know it's something necessary for life. There's that, water is necessary for life. But that there's a constant searching. A wild animal would always be looking for what? Clean, usable, potable water, right? That would be, I mean, their lives are very limited in that. Food and water search, safety, all of that.
When I was reading it, I just thought, this is all over the place, because he's saying, why are you bent over, oh my soul? Why are you moaning within me? And then he goes to 9 by saying, like Kate's saying, command his love for me, and in the evening may he sing lullabies to me. And then in 11, he's saying, slaughtering me to the bone. And I thought, this is just really intense, but again, good, bad, and the ugly.
It's good. Let's go back to that eighth grade poem that you may have written but never sent.
Yeah.
That you are in anguish, but what do you desire? You always like, I don't have what I think I need to complete myself. And yet that is what I desire. And when those needs are met, I will be, in ecstasy. I will be happy. I will be complete. I will be fulfilled. I will have drank my fill of cool water. I will have to, but it does say what the desire is. And often in our laments to God, we may be stuck in my soul is bent over. Life is crap and I hate it. And I don't know where you are, but if we can get to that point of saying what I desire to hear your lullabies. I desire to hear, to know that you will provide me with cool water. And isn't our life like that in some ways, where we go, a schizophrenic thing, what I need, what I'm not getting, what I long for, right? So there is kind of always that yes, and you recognize it, you see it in the psalm, and I think it is a reflection, at least of this poet's kind of, I think that the author chose 72 on purpose, or 42 on purpose, right? It's a different image of, it's not about sheep by the water, but it is about water, right? About, 23, what did we have? Leading me to green pastures and cool waters. Now we have this image of a deer longing for cool water. A little bit different, same pastoral kind of imagery, but very different, outcome, very different desire. Maybe the desire is not different. I think the desire is still to be in the presence of God, but I think just.
Well, the person to me kind of already is in the presence of God, so it's peaceful. And the
Yeah.
second one is, I want to get there, but can I get there? And I keep looking and seeking and will I find it?
Right. And there appears to be some outside influences here. This is not just, I mean, it could be an internal battle, okay, that's fine. But it also appears when they're saying, you know, whatever that sentence is that you were talking about, slaughtering me to the bone,
Yeah.
ridiculing me.
Why must I wait in darkness oppressed by my enemies, slaughtering me to the bone?
And people ask me, where is your God?
And where have we heard that? I think sometimes in some Holocaust stories, we've certainly heard of guards saying this to prisoners held in concentration camps. Where is your God? You know, that's been reported many times. We've heard it other ways, like in Job, if Job's friends saying, well, where is your God? Right? Jesus on the cross.
Yes, that would be.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Where is your God? So I think, I'm sure it's been said hundreds of thousands of times, when believers are in a particular situation. I'm watching the movie, again, for this Lenten class, about the guy who forgives his captors in Japan. Do you remember that one? And he goes back.
Unbroken.
Yeah, so I think about that.
Called Unbroken?
Yeah, they also throw that, you know, not directly like that, but I can imagine the is your God thing. And I think his friend said it to him, like, why would you go back and forgive that? Why don't you just let it go? You know?
Good.
Okay, what else would you say? I think the other key point is this wish for an idealized future. That's on page 90. It's just what you mentioned, Lynn, that sense of singing, a sense of how God will be behaving toward them, how they will be behaving toward God, that everything that we hope would happen is happening.
Well, and you think of how many times that the Jewish people were put into exile. You know, I mean, it's, you know, that's not like, you know, a smack on the hand and, you know, it's a lifetime change. I mean, when you were put in exile, if you thought about what it would be like for us today to be sent into exile, you know, that we were made the slaves of another group or told that we could no longer believe or express the things that we believe. And that is the reason a lot of these things, I think of them as songs that were written, or I did until I started reading them all again, but things that kept the people in captivity going. They were like songs that kept their faith going because they were in a place where no one paid, I mean, where they were being killed and worked and, you know, taken away from their lands and all this kind of stuff. And that these, to me, the Psalms were things that they could sing, things that they could say to themselves to keep themselves as a solid group, because that was important for them not to fall under the traditions of other outside people that had them. You know, the Baal worshippers, or even the
Or the kings of Babylon,
yeah,
yes.
those kind of people. And it was important that they keep their own identity, even if it were through just songs, to remind the people that, you are God's people. And just as a way of, because you could be killed if some rabbi or somebody was running around saying, okay, hold it together, folks. These songs to me were things that they could sing, and that the people that had them would never understand them. Almost to the point of, when I was reading this and I had those thoughts, of the wonderful gospel songs
Yes.
that they used to sing, and people, I mean, I wasn't there then, but people would sing, oh, isn't that lovely? And then I haven't been, guilty of that, because I love gospel music, but it was a way to keep the people together, to understand, what was happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
Kate, that goes along with the very last sentence of this chapter, where it says that the faithfulness is my victory. So the fact that they have been faithful says they've already won over their enemies.
Mhm.
And I think that's a beautiful way to summarize what we're not going to have a chance to do today in chapter 9, Psalm 77. Because he speaks about Psalm 77 as being a memory tool, a way that the key words in there act to help people remember who God is, even when everything around you is saying something else about who God is, or what your experience of God has been. So you're exactly right, that now we've moved from Psalms that had been personal in some ways to being Psalms that have more systemic importance. Do you see what I'm saying? Like addressing what you're saying, addressing exile in whatever form that takes, and addressing oppression, addressing those two kind of systemic ways that people were denied not only their humanity but their God. Or maybe that's one and the same. But if we just look briefly at 77, and if any of you have to go, I certainly understand.
I didn't read 77. I didn't know I was supposed to.
Yeah, we have to do 3 Psalms for the next 2 weeks. So, but you actually spoke into it. So I thought you read it. I thought that was a very amazing segment. You didn't even have to admit it. Okay.
All right.
So it's a very long, it's longer than the other Psalms that we've read.
Yeah.
Sharon, could I get you do you have time to stay on the call and read it?
I don't think she's
You're
here.
muted, Sharon.
You already read.
Where did she go?
I'm right here. I'll read it Yankee style, a little faster.
Okay.
For the leader on Jeduthun from the Asaph collection of Psalm. I raised my voice to God, I shrieked. I raised my voice to God, let him hear me. In my time of trouble, I searched for my Lord. My arm flailed the night tirelessly. I would not be comforted. Remembering God, I moan. When I express myself, my spirit collapses, Selah. You pulled my eyelids open. I was startled. I could not speak. I took account of the past, the long ago. Remembering my nightly wail, I would talk to myself and examine my own spirit. Will my Lord hide forever and never again be mollified? Has his love disappeared forever? Has he ended relating to each generation? Has God forgotten how to pity? Has his anger stifled his compassion? Selah. And I said, it is my sickness. Can heaven's right arm change? I remind myself of God's deeds. Yes, I remind myself of your wonders of old. I recount all your works. I speak of your acts. O God, your ways are holiness. What God is as great as God? You're the God who works wonders. You've manifested your strength among the peoples. By your arm, you redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. Selah. The waters saw you, O God. The waters saw you and were convulsed. The very deep quaked as well. Clouds streamed water. The heavens rumbled. Your arrows flew about. Your thunder sounded in the spheres. Lightning lit up the world. The earth quaked and trembled. Your way was through the sea, your path through the mighty waters, and where you stepped was never revealed. You led your people like a flock in the care of Moses and Aaron.
Very good.
I have a question, something I
Yes.
didn't understand at all. On verse 11, after all has his love disappeared forever, has he forgotten how to pity? And then I said, it is my sickness. Did anybody have any thoughts about that? What that meant? Maybe instead of it being God disappearing, maybe he was just in his depression, he couldn't see God.
Or
I
it's
think-
our sickness.
Huh?
Wouldn't that be our sickness?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that God can't change. God's heaven, can heaven's right arm change? I'm sorry, I maybe didn't understand the question, Lawson.
What did you think it meant when he said, the poet said, it is my sickness? I mean, I don't know
That
if
he's,
You're saying
that
it's like-
he's lost faith.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my dis-ease, right? So maybe that's another way to say it. My dis-ease about this circumstance that has, that's how I was reading it. And that I could imagine that heaven would change, that God's arm would not be the strong arm as other psalmists have said, right? It is the arm that moves the waters. I'm thinking, what is it in, oh, I can't think of it right now, but the psalm we read, it is by his right hand. Do you remember that? Like the psalm we always
his
read.
righteous right hand.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a familiar thing. So certainly, so this idea of remembering, recalling, reminding, creating this sort of ladder, this structure on which to recall, it's like a photo album. Have you ever done that? Like when things are crappy? I mean, normally we don't take pictures of things of crappy times. You know, there's weddings and birthdays and, you know, right? There's things, graduation. So we go to our photo albums and we look through those pictures and they help us remember better times. They help us remember our good relationships. They help us, right?
We don't take pictures of each other when we are doing crappy things.
Not usually.
Yeah.
You know, or I had a spiritual director once that said, you know, you have to have some way to organize your pantry, right? You can't just throw everything on the bottom of the floor. You'll never find the can of corn. You have to organize it in some way. And this psalm is an organizing tool to remember what is the greatest thing for the Jews. It's the Exodus, right? It's the fleeing of the horrible, horrible Pharaoh, who pales in comparison to modern day dictators, right? Pharaoh was awful. And so leaving Egypt, as disconcerting as it was, those trials and what they did and how God led them, the language is God led us.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that's the language.
But my problem with that I'm changing the subject because this is a question. But it always says that that God hardened Pharaoh's heart and made him do so and so. And so That's always really bugged me. Um,
Yeah, I thought he was always hard-hearted.
no, it says in the Bible that God hardened Pharaoh's heart,
Pharaoh made him
made him do those things.
I know it, and then they made him make bricks without straw, right?
Right.
Okay, so we know that, there was not
God-
enough. There
God
was
is
never,
proving a point. I mean, I don't, that is
Right.
always,
we can apply our logic to that, but I think we can say that, that greed and avarice and, pride and whatever else, pushed pharaohs forward in their conquest to be the greatest and to have these monuments and to have this stuff, whatever that was, God was able to use that to propel people to follow Moses, right? That
right,
we,
yeah.
how that worked and why that worked and what it would take, and maybe they'd still be left to their own devices, maybe they'd still be in Egypt, laboring with more bricks to make more bricks, right? I don't know.
At least in a place where there was oil.
Well,
We got into this one today, so we'll.
so you did, and then I included the hymn, as longs the deer for cooling streams.
Is it
And,
online?
yeah,
Okay, I didn't see it. Okay.
it's just a rephrasing of the psalm, in a nicer way, but verse 3 says, "Why restless, why cast down, why, my soul? Hope still, and thou shalt sing the praise of him who is thy God, thy health's eternal spring." But it doesn't have the same sort of despair that we find in the psalm, but it is a beautiful, and I cannot sing it for you because I don't know it well, but if you go online, you can find some choir singing it somewhere. And it's a lovely tune. I wish that we sang it more, truthfully.
Well, maybe Michael will do it if you ask him.
Maybe he will. All right, next week, 3 chapters.
Why are we hurt? Cause Lent's coming.
Because Lent's coming.
It's coming
We
up.
only have 2 more weeks, so
10 and 11 and 12.
yes, that's the rest of despair.
Well, you can be gone too.
But inland.
Okay.
All right,
No,
so
well, wait. So during Lent, is there gonna be a class in Lent?
on Wednesday nights, and it will be not available by Zoom on Wednesdays, but we are going to record it and put it up on YouTube. It's just because I'm showing movie clips, and I can't wrap my head around how we do it. Sorry to say.
Where's
So we
Ellen?
have to, I know, it's just hard on Zoom to use a movie clip that and then gets recorded. So we can record it, and then post it later that night. It doesn't allow for the community, I get that, but I think this,
Well, getting it on YouTube will be good.
Yeah.
and then Sundays, we're gonna be doing stuff on the Stations of the Cross, and that will be recorded and streamed live, so that's good, and that's almost finished.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, Lynn and Allison, can y'all stay on so y'all can update me about some of the things in Lent, please?
Yes, we can do that.
I was gonna ask you the same, Lawson, so thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
I have just one question,
Okay, one question.
just one quick question, is that when the person does the Psalms every Sunday, and they take the time, when they say, okay, we're gonna read it by half verse, we're gonna read it by half phrase, and all that kind of thing. And I always like for everybody to read it together. And I grew up with everybody reading it together because then I understood, I didn't have to keep worrying about where they started and where I stopped. And not listen to the song. I mean,
And
the
I think-
mechanical,
Yeah, and I think in communities that have that as their practice, people do it better. Because if you're somewhere where that's not the practice, when they're trying to read in unison, it lends itself to not being, very, what can you say? You don't get the effect of everybody reading it together. You get,
oh, you don't think so? See, my problem is that when I'm having to figure out, okay, the person who's leading it, they're gonna stop here. That means I have to start here. And I get so waiting to get into the right spot, or the person next to me, usually my husband, will keep reading when he's not supposed to, which throws everything off. And that's why I just think that reading it together gives you a chance to hear it all at one time.
if it's done well, it's beautiful. If that's the
Okay. I just didn't know if it was something that
no, if it's a tradition
done
of
for
the
a reason.
and they do it well, it's like, I love singing the songs, right? But if it's not the tradition of the congregation, it doesn't work. You know, if you don't understand Anglican chant and practice it faithfully, it comes across, it's distracting. I guess that's the word I was looking for. It becomes a distraction to the song, right? Just like not reading it well together is a distraction. And, so that, I guess, that, you know, they're just trying to find that, what's the practice of the community? How do we change that? Or how do we adapt that? Or how do we perfect that? Or, sometimes I just love having a cantor just sing the whole thing, right? Like that.
That's lovely. Yeah, like I said.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen here either, but that's not the community, and that's fine. So we trade things all the time in worship, don't we? We give up this for that, we give up, we take on this. So, but it's a great observation, and I know in Jewish congregations, the Psalms are read in unison, but
Yes.
that's, or appointed by a cantor, but that's their practice, and they're well versed in it, they know how to do it. Right? They know how to pause at the asterisk. Right? That's supposed to be a pause. Doesn't mean, it's not like take 2 weeks, but it's supposed to be like, take a breath and read the rest. But we don't pause there, and if it's not, and everybody, and now we all come from so many different traditions to be here that we try to find that sweet spot. Well, that we can all kind of say, okay, this is the Psalms,
See, my question that we've had, my husband and I've said, is, can we get kneeling friendly pews? Because, we come from where I kneel at all my churches I've gone through. We stand more when we pray here. It's like, hey, do we have kneeling friendly pews so that people want to kneel during the prayer? Because you won't piss off the person that's with you on the pews.
That's another one of those.
If you wanna kneel, you just go ahead and kneel, and maybe
That's
somebody-
right.
But you need to find out, because otherwise the kneeler's in their way of standing, so it's uncomfortable. So it's just, you can get over it, but I say, we're starting to come and it's like, okay, I feel.
You get a little bit more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Don't make me think that. It'll be all right.
Okay, bye, Kate.